As the year 2020 dawned, we had just cut a ribbon. We had a beautiful new space. We had just come off of an amazing conference with Bill Clinton. And all of a sudden, the biggest global disaster that any of us have experienced happens. It's March of 2020. And the first thing that starts to happen is we're getting calls from CDFIs saying, we're going to be here for our borrowers.
It was clear that a lot of the CDFIs across the country needed to have an emergency response to the needs of the businesses, in particular, in the communities where they operated. I recall, for example, talking to a lot of the small business-focused CDFIs, such as MoFi, that covered Montana and Idaho and covered a lot of the small businesses in that region, and just talking with Dave Glazer and others on his staff about what was going to happen in the short term to businesses who had 30-day net receivables that were all of a sudden being impacted.
We needed to ensure that folks here in Washington, D.C. understood that they had partners waiting on the ground in their communities that were ready to take on resources and be able to deploy them quickly to the communities that needed them most.
We were able to take our experience over the years of accessing resources and target them to underserved populations and advocate along with OFN, with other trade groups, with other CDFIs, particularly those in persistent poverty areas and those that serve communities of color, and advocate for policies and programs that prioritize these disproportionately vulnerable people and places.
In the early days of PPP, CDFI loan funds were shut out from the program. Early on, there were some requirements put in place, including a requirement for $50 million in annual small business lending to be able to participate. Our lenders were really not able to gain access to the SBA's platforms and to actually be able to process any PPP loans for their borrowers.
And I remember the banks being pretty worried. Like, we can compensate our clients, we can do this, but we don't have all the clients. You all do. You have another layer.
By working with Congress, we actually were able to get some pretty significant tweaks to the program early on that really allowed CDFIs to get more access. That included things like specific set-asides that were dedicated to mission lenders, or this new term, the community financial institutions that include CDFIs.
It was helpful having not only a network that was all trying to figure it out at one time, but ultimately a support system, knowing that there was a shared responsibility that we all had in making sure that our communities were being served.
Some of the first legislation that was drafted by the House that Chairwoman Waters introduced quoted data from our policy center and advocating for 40% of all funds to go to these historically under-resourced people and places.
Our mainstream banking partners really stepped up and really pushed for CDFIs to be able to have access to the program, because it was understood that we were going to be that missing piece of the puzzle that ensured that the businesses that were most underserved were able to actually get access.
It started off in a very sort of casual conversation between folks on the philanthropic side at Google, but then the pandemic hit, and they at Google really recognized in that moment that there was a deeper need for small businesses across the country.
These corporations wanted to be on the side of their suppliers and their customers and their communities succeeding. I remember being very challenging, a little bit stuck up. I was sort of saying to Google, well, we're serious about our communities. And the treasurer said to me, we have values too.
Google began to recognize that there was a deeper impact in communities of color where small businesses were often struggling to just meet their needs, meet the needs of their communities, even outside of the pandemic. So what ended up starting off as a discussion around lending capacity for small businesses turned into a really structured fund called the Grow with Google effort that led to over $125 million in funding towards CDFI small businesses across the country.
And Google didn't stop there. And I will always thank Google because they took a risk. They put 10-year paper with us at, literally 1%. That wasn't a market rate. And then they called their friends. They called Twitter and said, you should get in on this.
What we did at OFN at the time was form something called the Finance Justice Fund. And it was a campaign and an outreach effort to get more corporate partners, philanthropic partners, to all come together and invest in CDFIs to really address the issues of the pandemic, but also stabilize small business lending going forward for CDFIs.
We were able to, talk to many corporations. We worked with the Clinton Global Initiative to find more partners. Not everybody came in, but we got in front of other partners. Later, groups like Nextdoor. This had never been expected, that we would have Silicon Valley companies support unrated debt that OFN would manage and get out to its members. And they believed in Opportunity Finance Network.
That led to further investments from banks. It led to investments from other corporations. And so it turned into a really sizable and scalable opportunity for us to bring in new corporate partners and work with those corporate partners along with traditional investors in CDFIs to really stabilize small business lending across the country.
Yeah, I think 2020 and the response to the pandemic really showed not only the resilience of the individuals of the industry, but just the posture and positioning of CDFIs as a whole. We faced the uncertainty that everyone else did, but our industry, stayed at the forefront of making sure that communities were taken care of.
As I think about the evolution and the future of CDFIs, it's really exciting. I think we, as an industry, are stronger than we've ever been. There's still a lot of opportunity to have a larger impact and to go deeper and to strengthen the muscles that we've developed over the years.
What we experienced in 2020 redefined the work of CDFIs going forward. We will have to continue to be more responsive to challenges in the communities that relate to climate and resiliency. We will have to continue to bring in new partners to invest in the work that we do.
So that's been a lesson and a theme that we continue to carry forward in our advocacy work. Wherever there's some sort of problem, CDFIs are probably going to be able to come up with a creative solution to solve it.
And I think we hit an American vein here too, which is that in crisis, people are inspired to do more, to solve things, and to use unusual partners. And we became the unusual little guys who the country needed.